back again. You see speed at the bottom of the helix. Our next guest is a member of the Lone Star region, very likely the second closest clinician that lives close to me on the board of directors, as well as MMR number 620. He certainly excels in track work and scenery, so let's give our attention to Mr. Jeff Palmer.
Hi guys, this should be an interesting experience since I'm not completely up on all of the things here, but I should be able to get this thing going at this point. I think. There we go. Good. One of the things in the scenery that everybody has in one form or another are some kinds of roads, whether it's a dirt road, gravel road, blacktop or asphalt type of road, or a concrete road. And it's amazing how little attention is actually paid to most of these things. But it's also one of the things that gets the greatest amount of attention and or what is seen in your layout, because it usually occupies a great amount of space. And believe it or not, even the wagon trails back in the 1800s, which we'll use that as our first dirt road, 1700s and 1800s, they were there. They had all the scenery associated with it. And believe it or not, they followed trails. And so you had all of the Chisholm trails, the Mormon trails. You had all of the various trails that people actually would go up and sign up for lack of better terms, an adventure. I want to go to California, therefore you're going to go on the Oregon Trail, or you're going to go on the Mormon Trail to go through Utah. You're going to go to you're going to move cattle from Texas up towards Kansas City and up through Omaha. That area is going to be on the Chisholm Trail. They were the early roads. So getting, just kind of going from there. But when cars and trucks and stuff like that started showing up in the late 1800s and early 1900s, things got more formal. So basically what I'm trying to say is depending upon the era you're wanting to model, you might want to give some detail. I mean, the wheels on the old wagons that went through, on the Oregon Trail, we'll say, they're 4 feet wide. I mean, they're 4 feet apart. And so basically you have two wheel tracks that went down. And if you ever watch, the wagons don't fan out and go abreast. They follow one another. So those trails get, well ground down, and basically it's just a dirt road. And then it came, the early 1800s and 1900s, late 1800s. And we started getting more formal. We started getting things like streets through towns. I mean, we always had streets through town, even in the early days, but we didn't have the same kind of vehicles. We had the wagons and buggies were giving way to cars and trucks, and therefore the distance that was required for these vehicles to maneuver went from about 4 feet wide to about 6 to 7 feet wide. And therefore we ended up with lanes. If you look at the mid 1900s, we'll say in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the width of a lane was basically 8.5 feet. Well, when the big 18-wheelers came along, that was a problem. And then you've got some heavy excursion equipment, excavation equipment, and construction equipment. And some of those are huge. If you stop to think about those big mining trucks that you see, that they're 32 feet wide. They need a big lane. So anyway, you got your interstates and stuff like that. And so if you're modeling a more modern era, doing concrete type streets, and notice that, basically the modern roads are about 8.5 to 12 feet per lane, depending upon the era. They were actually wider in the 50s and 60s than they are today, as cars got basically better and people became hopefully better drivers. But the concrete sections for those roads became about 20 feet long. And if you will notice on your concrete roads, those are not boards they put in there to separate the sections. They actually went and cut them. And there's a whole science and reason for it. But they cut down about 4 inches into the concrete, specifically so that heat and cold and the expansion and contraction of the road can take place on those joints. So anyway, to make a long story short, there's a whole evolution and or history associated with the roads. And so basically they all started out with the basics, the dirt roads, the paths, the how to get from my ranch to your ranch to into town to sell the cattle, the vegetables, or whatever it is I happen to be my produce, then moving into the various areas. And so these roads became functional, starting, like I said, with the wagons that we talked about earlier. If you notice, they're falling in line. There's not, like I said, they're not fanning out. They're not going anywhere. This is a typical picture. It's not a specific picture of any one of the other trails. This is just saying, hey, this is how we move west from, say, St. Louis or wherever the starting point, Kansas City, and basically on our way to whatever Western destination we wanted to go to. So it's an opening. And today you can sign up for quote unquote adventures. And so you can still see some of the old, at least here in Texas, they allow us to still have adventures and you can get on the trails. But if you notice the trail there, because I mean, it's those trails are formed over basically repeated access over, dozens and dozens of years. This is exactly the kind of thing that would have happened in the early migration west. So, get used to the idea of the ruts. But notice the rut and how the smoothness in it. The grass does grow in the ruts and it just gets mashed down. But as they got developed and things got better, we ended up with something called a dirt road. Now, so far we haven't learned anything we didn't already know. But this is what basically a modern dirt road. Remember, I was talking to you about a 32-foot wide truck that would haul like 350, 400 tons of material at the time. This is their trail. This is one lane. So as you can see that what you should be seeing here is that there's dirt down grass growing down the middle of the road, and notice how the dirt is being piled up on the sides. As this heavy equipment moves and it's got several hundred tons of material in it, whether it's rock, stone, or more dirt, it's just causing the displacement on the dirt road. It's just one of those details you would want to pay attention to. And it's, like I said, when you start thinking about roads, what I'm really talking about is modeling the road and doing what we want to do with it, making it fit the era. I often see a lot of people who like to put, really great ruts in roads and basically they bury half a tire. Well, if you're buried up to your axle, you're not going to travel down that road. I don't care what vehicle you're in. And all I'm saying is that we want to give it some thought. If you want to have a road that's got dirt on it, a little rain or whatever has been happening recently, fine, make it. Notice the difference in the textures and the colors used here. I mean, this is nature. The untouched areas basically have sort of a lighter tan, lighter brown, whatever you want to call that, than the tire tracks where the traffic has come and gone. But notice that none of those ruts are you going to bury your axle in. And so, moderation here is something that would be important. Country roads. This is more the type of road that I grew up around. And this is not untypical. Again, this is a one-lane road. And most of the time, it's got some kind of gravel or rock or whatever that's been hauled around and placed on it over time. But it was basically a dirt road. And when they it's not thick enough to be a gravel road, but yet it's there. And you can see that, yeah, there's the build up towards the middle, the two main trails through there that would carry each side of the vehicle has depressed the ground down a little bit, but not to the point to where it's a rut or ditch. If you want to get into more of that, here is another example of, like I said, the dirt roads. I grew up in the Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri area, and this is what I saw more of. On a lot of the roads where we had the rain and stuff would wash away a lot of the dirt and leaving behind a lot of the stone and gravel and the underlayment associated with the composition of the area. And as we got around, especially up through Missouri, we got into the granite portions of it. This was not an unusual thing to be, just a little ways under the dirt, and that you had to take care of if you were a farmer or whatever to grow crops on. But this is just a typical road. And right down through the middle of it there, there's a rut. But the one thing that you could always count on, especially since probably the early 1900s, so if you're dealing 1930s, 40s, 50s, somewhere in there, you could count on maintenance on roads. And like here it says caution minimum maintenance road. I just thought I threw that sign in there just because there are signs around that actually let you know that some roads are better taken care of than others. But as with all roads, most of them are taken care of by the county or the state. Yeah, they don't always come through as nice and sweet as we'd like them to. Sometimes you get the typical potholes, but again, you don't get to the point to where you're burying a car in one of the potholes. The county or the state, depending upon who's in charge of the maintenance for the road, most dirt roads were county roads. They took care of it. I mean, this one here is a fairly modern picture, but as a kid growing up in the late 40s, early 50s, this was not an untypical scene. In this case, the road grader would be a little bit older and a little bit of a different style, but the concept and the use of it would be the same. So when you're talking about dirt, now if you're looking at the road, look at the colors. He's coming in. Someone has dumped a load of dirt that he is now going to spread, because it is not the same color as the dirt that's already there. But also notice again that as a result of weather and stuff like that, the splash along the side, I don't know a better term for it, but the debris along the side of the road, which you will also probably grate down, has a different consistency and a different look. So if you're modeling a road and you want to get in there and do some really interesting work, you've got color. It's not just monotone. So much for dirt roads. They, we see a lot of them on layouts. The things that I like to use are generally something along those lines. I usually use the Arizona rock and mineral type materials. Once I can get in various colors and I can get in various consistencies, and it works really well. Now, there are those people who go through the old school of, I want use my own dirt. That's great. I don't have a problem with that. If you're going to do it right. I've had a couple of my friends who did not take care of the dirt that they wanted to use out of their garden, and they ended up with various growth of mold and fungi on their layout, which kind of made for some interesting scenery, and as it got older, even interesting smells. But if you're going to do it, Lou Sassy probably did the best write-up on, I know, of using various kinds of material for ground cover. You might Google his information. He's done a lot of the Cullenback books. But basically, what you do is you take the dirt, you mix in a capful of Lysol concentrate, mix it up really good, and then spread it out on a baking sheet and put it in the oven for about 30 minutes at 200 degrees. And what that will do is it will kill, between the Lysol and the heat, will kill any insect eggs that may be in the dirt. Because keep in mind, the dirt itself isn't living, but there's a lot of stuff that live in the dirt, and that including the mold and the fungi. But there's a whole story behind a whole outcrop of, well, we'll just call them roaches for lack of better terms, that a friend was experiencing. He didn't understand where the infestation came from until he figured out where they were hatching. And that's an interesting story that we can get into. But he had to do some serious extermination. But as roads evolved, we went from the dirt road basically to the gravel road. And the reason being is very simple. The counties get tired of maintaining roads, and so dirt roads require a lot more maintenance than, say, a gravel road. And again, there's a whole science behind basically how gravel roads are made. This is not a new slide by any means. This is a very old slide, but notice that there's a slight curvature to the surface for each of the two lanes going each way, and then there's provides for a shoulder. You ever heard of the thing called the bar ditch? Well, that's one of the things you got to out in the country, and they were always usually along the edges of gravel roads, because the idea is that the rain, snow, and so forth, as it melted, need to have a place for the water to run to. And so ditches became a requirement. Did you see those along dirt roads? Yeah, you did. There were some. But it became more mandatory on the old gravel roads. And so sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't. Here's a gravel road. Not so much of anything there. I also know that this particular road is from a fairly arid area, so they were a little less concerned. But this road, you can see the definite curvature associated with the road. There's not a bar ditch, but it's high enough up that the curvature becomes apparent, because you can see that just in the quantity of leaves along the road, that the water would run off, i.e. lower maintenance, i.e. less tax money being spent. The gravel roads pretty soon became parking lots and other features that we still see a lot of. Anybody who lives out in the country, this is not an unusual scene, especially around co-ops and various kinds of. On this one, I think this one here is actually a maintenance building, but yeah, it's used for parking lots. Again, there's nothing special there. I usually use the finer ballast for gravel. I model an HO, and gravel to me is something that I should probably have about 20 pieces of gravel going from the heel of my shoe to my toe. Most of the larger dirts that are available, like O gauge here, this one here's in that bag shows O gauge ballast, is a little too large. I mean, it's nice for different size rocks and it adds contrast, but the long and the short of it is that I use the fine ballast on my HO. The reason being is that if I take one of the Pricer figures, or whoever else makes a figure, Woodland's Scenic's figure, and I set it down there, that the figure's foot can cover more than one stone. I like being able to put it down there, add a little more realism to the size and to the area, area that can be covered by a figure, and that's just me. Other people do it other ways. I can tell you that some of the results that you can get kind of look like this. And yes, are there other stones thrown in for contrast? Yes, because gravel is not uniform. There's nothing about it that should be uniform. But some of the things that you need, like on the roads, is like oil leaks, various kinds of things on the dirt. You got, gravel is not a perfect uniform covering for ground. Therefore, plants push up through it. Whether it's a weed or I've actually seen corn get somebody dropped some corn somewhere, and all of a sudden they ended up with a couple of corn stalks in the middle of a parking lot. So sunflowers is another one that I see a lot of, especially as I go more towards the West Coast. I see a lot more of the sunflowers, or towards South Texas. But again, you can add character to your road. Also notice that you got the bucks, and then you also got the crossing here. You got the timbers to get across the road. All those things are modeling elements. And so when I start thinking about roads, they're all modeling elements. I would take maybe not as much time and care building a road as I would, building a building. But the structure for roads is simpler, but it deserves the attention. It deserves to have a little garbage, a little rock thrown around on it. It deserves to have oil spilled on it. All of those things are elements that we would normally see on a road. And so when we're planning our road, that's probably what we should do. Well, as road evolution would have it, after a while, gravel roads became the basis for asphalt roads, which we still see a lot of. And to me, asphalt roads are fun to model, only because of the color, the characteristics, and the things you can do to it. Again, it has a structure. And the structure to a cross-section of an asphalt road kind of looks like this. Now, a lot of roads, asphalt roads, especially if you're doing 40s and 50s, didn't have all the lines. You just sort of were neighborly, and you kept your side of the road. So you might have a line that went down the middle, but very seldom did you have shoulder, markers on the road. But again, notice that there is a drop off, and notice that the first substrate just below the asphalt is basically gravel. So asphalt became the next step in the evolution on our way to, making our country roads requiring less maintenance until they need maintenance. And it's just, this is a typical oiled road going down through some farm country. And again, this is something that we see a lot of. Notice that there are, I'm going to call it them vertical cracks, and since only they follow the length of the road. But notice that due to weather changes, to the expansion and contraction of the roads, because they don't have any of the seams on it like you would on a concrete road, you end up with cracks. Well, where you got cracks and maintenance, you've got issues that got to be fixed. You end up basically at some point in time filling all of those with tar. Oops, I went one too many there. Kind of like this. This is an asphalt road, more along the lines of what we were talking about. Again, maintenance for an asphalt road basically said, you got a crack, go back and fill that crack with tar. And so this is a neat modeling point. Now you can kind of see this one here has a lot of maintenance on it. This one here is out towards West Texas and out towards a little bit of the hill country again as we get into New Mexico and that area. But it's a road, simple 2-lane road. fairly arid area, so the ditch along each of the sides is minimal, but you can tell that there's a slight curvature. The center line is higher than the lane lines. So it's a structure. It fits our structure. And like I said, as we paid more attention to it, we get all the tars. But the thing that I like about the tar, it adds an interesting contrast. You have the gravel and dirt that makes up the tar here mixed up, because I mean, over time, I mean, there's as much dirt and other debris that's been put on the road and has been ground in as there is anything else. And so you look at filling all the cracks with tar. That's an interesting model point. And again, the materials for that are fairly straightforward and fairly easily obtained. I use the Arizona rock and mineral mainly because I lay it down. It comes out a fairly nice, dark, deep gray. But if I go back over that with a little piece of sandpaper, it turns into the lighter gray that we see on a lot of the roads in some of the earlier films or earlier pictures. We got, I can take that and, like I said, mix it with the glue, spread it out with a knife, a putty knife, and it will dry within probably an hour or so. I can go lightly sand it, and all of a sudden I've got a relatively used road. And basically that's what these are. This is off a friend of mine's layout. And this is the asphalt road that I built on his layout. And notice all the cracks. You have the cracks going across along the edges. All of those are done by markers with very fine points. The finer the point that you can get, the finer the line you can draw. And as a result of that, you can add all kinds of interesting detail. But like I said, I like asphalt, and it's one of the things that I generally try to encourage on people, more so than dirt roads and trails. If you're going up to a farmhouse, you want a dirt road. Very seldom does a farmhouse have a concrete driveway. It might have a gravel driveway, but I can almost guarantee that it probably came off of a blacktop road, or the blacktop road has been replaced. It would be a concrete road that goes up to farmhouses. I grew up in the North Dallas area back in the days when North Dallas it was mainly farm fields. And this is what we saw. Parking lot, this one here has little oil splatters here and there. It's got, again, the cracks in the road. Can't give you much more than that. But I do have a modeling challenge for you. This was a picture I came across while I was putting together this particular presentation a couple of years ago. And I thought this was just someone was having fun. I think this was basically someone's editorial about the conditions of the road in this town. And I thought it was good. But it's a modeling challenge. It's one of those things that you can get into and have some fun with. Well, needless to say, most asphalt roads are given way to concrete roads, and they have a definite shape, contour, if you will. And if you look at, again, the cross section, you can almost see the evolution of roads here. Notice the asphalt base underneath an aggregate sub base, and then it has the road base with you can see the rebar. That's what all the little round circles are there. It's running down through there for the concrete. Yep, it's got a center line, but also notice the curvature. The idea is, again, you get water off the road and off into the ditch alongside, or into one of the culverts where it'll go into the sewer system and drain off to one of the lakes someplace. But here's what happens when you have a lot of neglect for a concrete road. Now, to me, this is an interesting modeling challenge. I have not tried this one yet, but I saw this particular road. And I said to myself, this is a modeling challenge. Look at it. I mean, this road, it has been neglected. Let's face it. You can see the curvature. You can also see where the center line has been worn off, but you got all the grass growing up and all in the cracks. Therefore, this particular concrete road was probably not poured very thick. And it's in definite need of maintenance. Need to talk to the county about that one. More typically, you see something like this. And again, you can see where the concrete's broke up into sections. And if you're going to create a concrete road, you want to have something where it has the section. Otherwise, it looks like a continuous ribbon of concrete with basically your mind keeps trying to figure out what's missing, and what's missing is basically all the joints, because they're there, put there purposely. It's part of the construction process, and should not be overlooked if we're going to model it. If you're doing something really big, now this one here is not all that big. I mean, we have highways around Dallas that are bigger than this. Take LBJ, and it's 6-lane wide. But this is a nice job, nice basic diagram. But you can see all of the same pieces that we were just talking about. You can see the 20-foot sections. You can see the center lines on the lanes where the road was cut with a wheel. This particular one has a lead on, and I was not sure exactly what the lead on was. I wasn't sure if that was a asphalt lead on or a concrete lead on. Not sure on this one, but you can see it gives you some variety. It gives you some elements, and you can see the differences. Road construction, like I said, is fairly simple, but typical neighborhood. This is out of the 60s. This one was in California, and is up around my cousin's house in Sacramento. Has some interesting elements. Notice that speed limit. They were, in those days, even posting it on the road. You had 35. You had all the general cuts. You had the curbing. But if you notice in some of the roads, not all the roads had curbing. But since this is in the city, they had curbing, and then you see the little island between the curbing and the sidewalk that makes up most of our cities and towns today. And again, it allows us to do the mind thing that basically says, if I add this detail, it will be more of what I'm used to seeing, what will cause no conflict in my mind in trying to fix it. Because that's what most of us see when we go to someone's layout and there's something wrong. We just can't figure out what it is. Also, I like this one here because it had the manhole cover. And most manhole covers tend to be towards, especially in urban streets, tend to be towards the middle. Not always, but many times. And it was one of those things where, like I said, it's a detail. It's one of those things that you have. It's all about detail and being able to get it there. Concrete materials I generally like to use is usually along these lines. I usually use something like, Arizona Rock and Mineral. But I've seen people who were quite successful at using grout. I've seen people who've been quite good at some of the other, like plaster. You can do a lot of things. Something that'll give you some texture to it. I've seen people use this kind of material. The thing that I dislike about using it, these are now acrylic based or vinyl based, and they leave a shine. Whenever I do that, I go back and paint the road with paint so that I can get the flat look associated with most of the roads that we're done on, because most roads are not shiny unless they're brand new. And even then, I would question whether or not they're shiny. But I've seen people who have gotten good results because they went back and did all the work necessary to put in the lines, to put in the details, to tone down the shininess of either of these and make it work. So, roads, they're fun. Like I said, you just need to pay attention to some of the details. And if you do, it will look like a road instead of somebody just throwing down a piece of vinyl there or patch. I mean, you can buy material that will go down seamlessly from Woodland Scenics and other companies that, here's a road. It's already got all the lane markings on it. But again, it just doesn't look right. It looks like a toy. So be careful. Roads present some interesting detail, and they're fun, which brings us to here. And somewhere in here, I get to give all of this back to the powers to be. And there we go.
There's no powers, just a helix.
Okay. How's it going, Speed?
Good. You have at least 4 questions, unless
Okay.
the congregation is waking up right now. So first one, have you mixed either fine cinder or ballast in the asphalt?
Yes.
Done that before?
Yeah. I mean, when you're mixing up, like I said, I like using the Arizona stone because you mix it with basically watered down glue, and you get to spread it out. But then if you want to put some cinders and some other stuff in there to add contrast, you can. It works. It does well. The thing that I like about most of it is that most asphalt roads tend to be relatively uniform. They have holes in them, and so you can model a hole. But keep in mind that when you do that, you fill the hole with whatever dirt is popular. So, because basically, if you stop and looked at asphalt's only about 4 inches thick, 6 inches at most.
What's the easiest way to make those? What's the easiest way to make those cracks?
Easiest way is to get a fine point Sharpie and have a light touch.
Cool.
Draw the lines and draw them in both the vertical and horizontal, up the road and cross the road.
Yep.
You want to be able to go both, because cracks do not run uniformly.
Is there a standard width for dirt roads and for?
Yeah, I gave that
roads?
earlier in the slide presentation when we were talking about sizes of roads. But keep in mind that you're doing a single lane road or a double lane road, and it doesn't make any difference whether it's a dirt road or a concrete road. You're looking at 8.5 to 12 feet per lane. So that would means that you would be about 24 scale feet across for a road that goes in both directions.
I missed it. What is the difference between a white center line and a yellow center line?
Depends on what state you're driving in. The only thing that really makes a difference is whether or not you have a solid line or a dash line. The dash line says I can pass. The solid line says stay in your lane. The color is dependent upon whatever that state has decided for marking roads. Usually, the yellow lines, if you ever look at them, has more sand and reflective material in it than some of the white ones. The white ones are just supposed to pick up light. White ones were almost always default, and then someone added some neat stuff to yellow paint, and yellow became. So it depends on where you're from. That's a local call.
Would you know what time frame were brick roads?
Brick roads you're going to come up in the 1800 era, 1700s at the earliest, but 1800s you would see them around city streets and stuff like that. Yeah, and when I say city streets, we're talking about fairly big cities for their time. Places like St. Louis, places like New York City, places like Boston. You saw a lot of brick roads. You didn't see a lot of brick roads down into the smaller towns. Most of them had gravel roads, or they would now they come back and put in brick just for tourism, for lack of better terms, because it's kind of a neat aspect. So I mean, in today's time, you use it anywhere where you want to add a little bit of change or make it different.
Have you ever tried Have you ever tried play sand for stone roads?
Yes. I'm sorry. I had to think about that for a second. Use some of the finer grit stands. Don't use some of the sand like you would use for. When I say that, it's like play sand. Use play sand, but some of the other sands like you'd use mix for like concrete. If you're mixing your own concrete and or mortar, it tends to be a little large unless you're an O.
So someone was curious about the AK interactive products you illustrated. Are those
Yes, I
actual
like
road
the AK
materials?
products.
Are they actual road materials or just a coloring agent?
No, when you buy one of those, it's ready mixed and ready to go down.
So build your road right away.
Yes. Yeah, and I like I said, I like a lot of the AK materials. I mean, I'm started using lots of AK paints, and so with their diorama material, they also have a dirt material there. I use Arizona Stone, but AK also has diorama dirt, for lack of better terms. That
Where
would
do
be
you
good.
buy the Arizona Stone?
I buy it at my local hobby shop, but our Arizona Stone can be also gotten off online, and it's just called Arizona Rock and Mineral. Just Google it, and you'll get to the website.
What is the glue material you mix? What is the glue to material mix you're using?
I usually use 50-50 glue, and it's just a straight, PVA type glue. We normally, think about using for scenic materials. It's nothing special. It's not the school glue, because the school glue doesn't stick well. But it's just a straight normal PVA from Elmer's or whoever that you can buy in gallon jugs. I get mine at Walmart. So,
Any recommendations for the color gray paint to use for asphalt?
all of us see a little different, and I'm going to tell you that scenery is basically how you see something, not how I see something. And like I said, I use a light sanding on the dark material from Arizona Stone because it turns out very nicely. But you don't want to go. I would tell you to use gray, not light gray and not dark gray. Just use a gray, and hit it with if you're going to airbrush it on.
Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions. That was
Good.
really, really nice. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. And thank you guys for having me.
One more question. Can you do a clinic on sidewalks next?
Yeah. I can do that. Yes, I could. Anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you,
I
Jeff.
will see you later on.
Be safe.